to go live. Okay, so we are now streaming on YouTube. All right, you guys, thank you so much for coming tonight, and thank you, Suzanne, for being here with us. My name is Becky Prater, and I recently had a session with Suzanne, and I actually took a year to get into the session, and I'm so glad because the information that came at this time was based on my now self after having gone through 6 months of spiritual development during COVID because there's nothing else to do. And so if it happened last year, I would have been a different person, and I'm glad it didn't because now is the right time. Okay, so Suzanne Spooner is a world-renowned explorer of human consciousness using the modalities of hypnosis, meditation, and channeling. Her empowering work in the field of hypnosis began in 2012, learning from the great Dolores Cannon. Suzanne has mastered Dolores' hypnosis technique called quantum healing hypnosis technique. She has directly assisted Dolores in classes and currently assists and teaches with her daughter, Julia Cannon. Suzanne is a director of the global official QHHT Forum of Practitioners and maintains a busy QHHT session, hence a year out. Oh my gosh, it's amazing. She practices in Des Moines, Iowa, and internationally via her global touring sessions. Suzanne feels her life work is to assist others to find their own answers and heal from within. She wishes to guide humanity in having a clear and easy connection to the part of themselves that loves unconditionally and has access to their sovereign self. Suzanne's other bodies of work in the field of human consciousness include her teachable method of channeling called The Art of Universal Knowing, and the guided meditation called the Universal Mind Project. So thank you so much. It's such a great honor. Thank you for those of us joining us tonight. Okay, so I would like to just begin maybe having you tell me or tell everybody a little bit about QHHT and how you got involved in that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thank you for asking me to be on with you, Becky. I'm really excited to talk about this stuff. Okay, so quantum hypnosis healing technique is the name of the process that I practice. It was created by Dolores Cannon, who did hypnosis work for over 45 years. She left us in 2014. So she was really a pioneer in both past life regression and then what developed as her own process called QHHT. Quantum hypnosis is more about helping people find all of their answers within themselves. It's a beautiful, empowering experience, as you know, where the client will come into a session with a list of questions that they want to have answered. They're usually a list of both health and body questions and life and personal questions. And we sit and talk for a while. I give the client the most helpful tips that I know of in my years of experience to help them let go and allow and have this very deep and profound experience. They will share with me a bit about their life story. That helps me so much to help them, because when we start the session, in the most amazing ways, that session will relate with their current life. And if I know how their life journey has been, it helps me then to ask them more profound and deep questions to get the more profound and deep answers for them. So after we've had that talk and looked over their list of questions, that's when we start the actual hypnosis session. I just very easily guide people into a deeply relaxed state. They will typically start off going into what we call a past life. But it can really be anywhere. Time is not a thing, really. So sometimes they'll go into what we call the future. Sometimes it's the past. Sometimes there's a memory from their current life that is important to revisit. What we know in this work is wherever the client goes is where they need to go to understand something more deeply and profoundly about themselves. So that's always a surprise, as I think you can attest to. Nobody goes where they think they're going to, and that's part of the fun. But it's always exactly where they need to go. when we get done looking at those other lifetimes or stories, if you don't, if past life isn't a concept that you don't believe in, that's totally fine. We'll just call it a story. Your deep subconscious is going to guide you to a story that helps you understand something important about yourself. So, it's just a concept. But when we get done looking at that part, that's when I think the magic really begins. Because I'll just guide them just very easily into this nice, deep part of themselves that knows everything. And I mean everything. And once we get to that part, that's when I start asking the list of questions, and the client starts answering from this deep space of knowing that we all carry, but we're unfortunately not taught how to access. But this is what this is. And the client is answering their own questions, healing their own body, finding out the origin of their issues in a space that their analytical left brain couldn't have come up with, which is beautiful. It's one of the most empowering processes that I know of, because it's not me answering the questions or me doing the healing, it's the client doing it. And that resonates, I think, way more deeply than me saying, well, in a past life you were blah blah blah, and the root reason for your physical issue is this, that I don't know, and I'm my own filter, and we want it to come from the client because they don't filter.
Oh, excellent. Okay, so a couple of things you said that I, in my experience, felt that's so good. The idea, okay, so this whole thing about healing and how it heals. Okay, when you say to somebody, tell me your life story, that giving somebody the space and the patience and the interest, it's almost like for the first time, some people probably for the first time get to tell their life story to somebody who's actually listening.
Yes.
That was the start of it for sure.
That actually is where a lot of healing begins. And it's a space of compassionate listening, non-judgmental listening. And everybody has the most amazing story, no matter what your life has been like. And it's very rare that anybody has ever said their whole life story without somebody stopping them and correcting them, or, you remember that wrong. And so it's everybody has something to say about their life from their perspective, and to be heard and let that story flow through them is a very healing experience. And it gives me the understanding that helps me, once we start the session, to pinpoint the things that have tripped them up or that they need to know more about in order to go forward in their highest and best way. So once I am able to take their story in, then I can best ask the most important and profound questions that I can come up with to get them to give the information in their highest and best way.
Oh, that is good. Hey, when you said the thing about, okay, so we went to the past life, my past life, and I kind of had the idea that it was all about that. Like it was a past life regression situation. And then you said something like, hey, give me questions that you want to ask your higher self. And so I kind of figured it'd be like an 80-20 thing, but our session, it was more like 20% past life and 80% talking to your higher self.
They're all different. We try to split it up kind of evenly with that, but it depends on, if somebody has a longer list of questions. Sometimes people have just a few questions, but each answer is about 20 minutes long. So, we have to kind of roll and flow with it. But yeah, asking, taking the time to sit down and think, gosh, if I could ask my soul anything, what would I ask it? It's a beautiful exercise. And the mysteries about your childhood or about events that have happened in your life that you don't quite understand or you feel very victimized about, those are wonderful things to ask about, because we tend to look at those things, from an analytical point of view. And what we find in the sessions is you get a much more well-rounded perspective in ways that your left brain can't come up with. And, that's, I tease everybody, and I say, I wish, I could open up this whole window and this wall when you guys walk out, because I feel like your heads are all this big, afterwards, like, whoa, what just happened? And it's just the most profound day. And it has the potential of being really, truly one of the best days of your life, because you're accessing your knowledge, and that doesn't turn off after the session unless you want it to.
Yes. In fact, I noticed that what my higher self said seemed right, and it seemed familiar. And yet there were things about it that were surprising. So I felt like I had been in communication with my higher self a lot because I had heard these things before. But I was also surprised at the intricacies of it. Made it seem like it was different enough that it wasn't for me. And so how do you notice, like, how can you tell the difference between somebody's regular voice and their higher self? Can you see people toggling in a session between the two?
Oh, absolutely. And let me back it up a little bit about the things that and the things that surprise you, because that happens in every session. So what I would say about that is, in every session, there's going to be things that you say that and sometimes you, as your high self or subconscious, will say, well, she already knows this. That's really common. And to me, that's great, because what you're demonstrating for yourself is you are listening to your internal guidance. And this is confirmation. That's wonderful. That's a gift unto itself. But in almost every session, usually multiple times, this part of you, it's you, but this part of you that you don't rely on as often, this high self, will say things that you weren't expecting. Or it'll put many more layers into it than what your analytical mind could come up with. And usually this stream of thought is coming through quite quickly, and it's not like you could sit there and think on it first and say it. It's just right there. So that's a good marker that you're touching into that deep part. But sometimes when they're answering their own questions and this new information is coming out, the high self will say funny things. They'll say, like, well, she thought the answer is going to be this, but she's totally off base. It's really this. Or, she wants it to be this, but actually it's this, and here is why. And it will go into this great explanation. And, the left brain can't come up with that. So there's lots of things I'm watching for and listening for to get a really good sense of where people are between the left and the right brain. The left brain is not that creative. So those answers are pretty typical. And when I see that people are floating over to that left side, if they do, I'm pretty good at, like roping a cow, bringing it back over to the right side and settling back into that part of us that knows everything. So it's always, everybody is different. We work with what we get.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So I have a couple of questions specifically. So when reading Dolores Cannon's books or watching her videos, it sounds like with this practice, people seem to come from all sorts of places, times, like places beyond Earth. What are some of the things and the interesting things that you've experienced?
Oh my gosh, every session is like a mind blower. But right, so our souls, as far as I can understand, and through Dolores's work, are to experience everything. So if that's the case, then we have to be everything from everywhere, in order to have the full soul experience. So yes, it's very common for people to have past lives, if we're going to call it that, on Earth, but they could be on other planets. They could be in other versions of Earth or other dimensions. Time is a really funny thing. And, when I'm in conversations with the high selves, they're just like, oh my gosh, we don't deal with time the way that you guys do. And there is no time. It's an illusion. And, so our heads are geared to think about time in one way, but oftentimes in the sessions, they're going to talk about things happening, lifetimes happening simultaneously, concurrently, that we're, having, in this one moment, we're having multiple experiences in different realms. we're focused on this one. And it's probably better right now that we are, because there's a lot going on here. But it kind of explains dreams and deja vus and, places that you go to that you just feel so familiar with, people that you meet that you're instantly best friends or you instantly dislike. There's so much more to those stories.
Yeah. Well, and it probably confirms, the more you read, the more these things kind of percolate up. The idea of time is just a man-made function, and, concurrent lifetimes. I mean, most of us that are in this, probably listening on this call, get that and heard that. So when you are in a session and you actually experience somebody saying that, it's got to reinforce your belief in it.
I hope to stay a very open book. I like to say I know nothing and I'm searching for everything. I think all things are possible. That's what this work over the last 8 years has taught me. And, I think each of us has our own reality and our own soul experience. And one is not any better than another, just very, very different. So, that one of the things that people will say to me, like at a gathering or a party, when we start talking about what I do, is they'll say, "Oh, everybody's Cleopatra," and I'm like, "Well, yeah, but no, if you really want to get into that, yes, there's probably one soul that has had the physical life of Cleopatra, but there's a way that anybody could tap into that life to draw on lessons and knowledge that they can use in this life." So,
talk about that. You said I know you said it was called an imprint, but I also wonder if you are a really good meditator, like if this is what you did, you could still somehow tap into that vibration deliberately, even though it maybe not even is imprinted. But tell us about the imprint thing.
So the imprint thing is really amazing. Dolores was one that discovered this. I think there's been others that have come across this concept before as well, but she really delved into it. So the imprint is like this. Say that I'm going to go into a life. In this life, my journey is to be a strong female leader. But say my soul has never had that experience to draw on. So what am I going to do? So what we found in this work is that, the beings, the helpers, the angels, the guides, whatever name you want to give them, that are helping you prepare for your next lifetime, if your soul doesn't have that memory in your deep, deep subconscious to draw on, it will imprint the soul or the life of another. And it's what we found in this work is that when that happens and we tap into it, it's just as if it was your life. So that's how more than one person can be Cleopatra. To them, it is a real life. Although it's very interesting in sessions, I can ask the subconscious, was this their actual life or is this an imprint? That's always a really interesting answer. It's usually an imprint. And then we can ask why, why did that happen? And for each person, it's an individual thing. But then that person who needed to be that strong female leader, we'll call like a natural born leader, like, wow, at a young age, she was doing this and that. And, she just didn't know where this came from. It just is a natural gift of hers. But what we found is that they're drawing on those characteristics from that deep soul memory.
Whoa, which you could link up to archetypes. Maybe that's like she is the archetype of this, and that is like the imprint of the archetype onto that person.
Could be, yes, very well.
Interesting. Okay, so tell me, how did you get connected up with Dolores? Like what got you into this in the first place?
Well, I fell upon Dolores, I think like most people do, where I accidentally clicked on something on YouTube and there she was. I wasn't looking for her. It's just the funniest way of finding your calling, I guess. But the first time I saw her, the thing that struck me about Dolores was that she looked like my grandma who had passed. And I'm like, oh my gosh, she looks like my grandma Nettie. I'm like, so I'll listen to her. And at that time, she was talking about ETs, but at that time, my head wasn't quite there yet. And I'm like, okay, that's really cool and that's really weird. And I think I just like shut the laptop down. But a year later, I was listening. There's a lady named Lulu Mace who I loved that was doing interviews a lot of the time of spiritual people. And I happened to be driving back from Chicago. So it's, about a 5-hour drive from Des Moines. And I was bored and I was listening to a Lulu Mace interview, and it was Dolores. And Dolores was speaking about Convoluted Universe Book 3. It's a series of books that she's done. Now, when she's talking about those convoluted chapters are about all different types of lives, different information from the high cells. And for me, that I could hone in on that. And I was a little more open to the ET thing by then too. It had been a year. And so that drive home, I just decided, like I think most people at the time, I want to have a session with Dolores. And so I got home and I called the office. And I'm like, I want a session with Dolores. And they're like, okay, it's going to be like 2 years. I'm like, oh, okay, put me on the list. And then I got to looking at her website and I saw that she taught. And I thought, wow, I've never thought about, like learning how to do hypnosis. I'd never done that type of work before. And, but I loved the aspect that all of the answers are within, and that was already jiving with the spiritual work that I was creating. It went very hand in hand. And so I just decided, heck with it, I'm going to take the class. And I signed up for the very next class, and I just have been with it ever since.
Wow. And so now you actually do teach on a regular basis all over the world, don't you?
Over the years, yes. I was very lucky in that I learned in 2012, and through the end of Dolores' life in November of 2014, I was assisting her, which was an awesome experience. She was just legendary, and but she was also very human and sweet. And some of my funnest memories are getting to take her to lunch or walking her down from her room to the conference center and just being able to ask her questions about her sessions that she had. And the woman just had a mind of a steel trap. I could just pull something out from, a chapter in one of the books, and she'd be like, okay, let me tell you what happened there. And it was just, it was a blessing. And then when she passed, I was friends with her daughter, Julia, and it was, just a natural thing to step in and help Julia with those classes. And it's been a fun journey ever since.
Oh my gosh. I'm sure not very many of us get to learn from the founder of something. I mean, that's pretty incredible. But you actually founded, let's see, what was it? Let me see. The Art of Universal Knowing. So that was like a channeling method that you've sort of founded. You founded, you're guided.
Yeah. So the Art of Universal Knowing, or the acronym is TAUK, talk, which is kind of funny because it's like talking, but a little bit different. It was a process that came through me. I didn't know really what it was at the time, other than I was able to get messages from loved ones that had passed, and that expanded exponentially once I wrapped my head around what was happening. And I started, once I understood, I thought the process that it was, I really didn't know what in the heck I had it at first. I started sharing with my friends, and lo and behold, they would start getting messages. And then word started getting out, and I got opened a little tiny office, and people would start coming to learn how to do it. And I just thought, well, if this is what it's meant to be, teaching one-on-one or even in small classes just wasn't effective. So my guides, worked with me in the most amazing way they co-created the online class. And that's been up, I think, since 2009. And still is going today, so people can learn to channel, to get messages from their loved ones, from their guides. It's amazing. It happens every single time.
And it's using a pendulum, didn't you say?
Yes, it's using the tools of a letter chart and a pendulum. Pendulum is feeding off the vibrations of your energy. And so anybody can use a pendulum. And it's nice because, you can teach people how to do automatic writing, automatic keyboarding. But with that, especially when you're brand new, then the left brain doubt starts to come in, and maybe I'm just making this up, and maybe this isn't real. But the gift of using the pendulum is, trust me, you can't make it go to those letters. That's too much work. It won't work. But if you're holding it still over the center and you're thinking a question or just letting a message come through, it just will move to the letters. And so the course is just teaching people how to start and begin with that. Then, some people who have learned it, that's their jumping off point, and then they'll go into automatic writing, and they understand what it feels like to receive the message through them. I still love to use the chart and the pendulum. To me, it's a very relaxing, almost a meditative experience. So to this day, I still use that.
Oh, I love it. I totally want to try that out because I love pendulums. Weirdly enough, I've been on a spiritual journey since I was like in 8th grade. And just in the past 5 years have I started using them. I always thought it was just some crazy thing wacky people did. And now I'm like, should I go for a walk or should I not? Let me check the pendulum. I use it all the time because it really does give me answers oftentimes that I'm surprised about. And it feels like it's right. And most, I ask it things that maybe it doesn't matter what the answer is. I go either way, but still. But that, it doesn't give you yes or no answer. That would give you actual messages. So
they're actual messages.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I would love it if you'd share maybe just some interesting, maybe a couple of really interesting experiences in your QHHT sessions. Like if there's anything that you would just feel like, because I would imagine most of the stuff that comes through that the higher self says, there's got to be some consistencies and lessons for you in it. So share some of that information.
Well, sure. Okay. So a lot of people want to know what's the most common advice that is given across the board. So let me start with that. The most common thing that the high selves or the subconscious will say that's important for us to be doing is meditation, because they say that's how they more easily connect with us. We have free will, and that left brain can get really stirred up and kind of shut down the connection to the high self. So they say meditation is the way to connect with them and receive clarity. So that's a biggie. The other one is drink water. They want us to drink lots of water because we're electrical beings, and the more water that we take in, the better the receiving of the messages and the sending out happens. The other thing that is, everybody has such different life stories, none like the other. But in most human life, it's a challenging life. There are really hard things that we all have worked through or are working through. And the advice that is often given throughout many different lifetime stories is that we need to forgive. That when we hold on to anger or sadness or disappointment or whatever that is, that emotion stores up within us and it will create havoc within the physical body and the emotional body. And so, oftentimes, I'll have clients who say they can't remember their childhood and they want to, why can't I remember? And the high selves oftentimes will say, you don't need to remember. We took that away so that you wouldn't remember. You don't need it. It's just trauma. And so it's like a gift of benevolence, actually. Or they'll say, they'll come in with a life story where, everybody's been terrible to them. They're just this kid trying to grow up in this family, and it's just been one traumatic event after another, and nobody's got their back, and what the heck? And, that it creates a victimhood idea. And you can't blame them. I mean, that in a human experience, we would go with that. But the beauty of what we find out in the session is the story behind the story. And, this is why this needed to happen. And you asked to learn about this. And this soul who looks like a very bad person on the outside volunteered to be the bad guy so that your soul could learn what you're asked to learn. And that's a hard thing to swallow. I mean, the left brain is going to have a lot of issues with that, but it's shown so multi-layered that afterwards, what I find is that they can release it and they don't need to hang on to the anger anymore or the unhappiness. And that anger and unhappiness really never affects the other person. It affects us who's holding it. And the body reacts differently and will start to heal, because those issues create things like cancer and create things like other types of diseases and discomforts within the body over a period of time. And this is really getting down to the deep level of where it began at.
Whoa. So you said some people volunteered to be the bad guy. Mm-hmm. So so when somebody, we can get into the part of our conversation or my session that talked about that, but in a sec. But so you've been in a session where you actually said that to somebody and they realized that they volunteered to be the bad guy. And then does that help them say and kind of renegotiate the contract and say, I'm done being the bad guy. That's not what I want to do.
Yeah, I would phrase it a little bit differently, although, I mean, they can do that. They can renegotiate a contract, but it's almost just like it gives them a wider perspective. Instead of being in this tunnel vision of this guy won't leave me alone, it's just been the nemesis of my life, it gives a broader view of why this is happening and, maybe what his lesson is in all of it and how you're helping him. So I don't know, it's part of what I think has been a big teacher to me in being very non-judgmental. Because you have to understand there's so much more to the story than what we're seeing on the surface.
Yeah, and so many different layers to everything. I know when you think about when people say, "Oh, what's my purpose in life?" I think you got a million, like you're serving your purpose every minute, every day, every hour, every year of your life. So it's really hard to put that into one word or one phrase.
Right. But that is like the golden question. That's the one question almost everybody asks on their list of questions. What is my purpose?
Yeah. Well, I think I did. And I essentially just said that everything I was doing, even though it didn't seem like the thing, was part of the thing, and it was all interrelated. So I'm sure that's the truth, or one of the truths. It was funny because when I walked into your office, it was hard to even say anything, because we see how when we talk about time, it's kind of non-existent. When we talk about something being good or bad, it's not really that either. So having a conversation with somebody that's in the same space is so interesting, because how do you even hold on to one idea? Because there's so many different factors involved in that one idea that it's really hard to lay down a truth.
It is. That's why, I say, you're here to have the session, excuse me, but really you're here to put this information onto this recording we're making for you. Because really the most beautiful part of what occurred in the session is going to unfold after you leave my office. And that's listening to the recording and replaying in your mind what you learned about yourself in the past life or the future life, and the answers and the healing. Because even for those who feel that, they remember everything after the session, they don't. Trust me, you don't. And when you hear the recording, you'll hear things on it that you swear to gosh weren't on there before, or because some life experiences happened since then, you'll understand when you listen 6 months later to something you remember saying, but now you'll understand it either much, much more.
Oh, you stopped. Oh, there. It cut out for a sec. Say that last little bit again.
So by listening to the recording over and over different periods of time, you're going to hear things that you swear to gosh weren't on there before, or you'll hear things that you've heard before, but because of different life scenarios that have occurred since then, you'll understand those those things that you remember either much, much more deeply or completely differently than what you originally thought it meant.
Mm.
So it's like the layers of the onion. You'll peel this onion for the rest of your life after the session.
Yeah, it was a little bit uncomfortable for me to listen to my session again. I mean, I listened to it in full, and I felt just raw afterwards, just raw. And it's not like, I mean, I don't even know, why would that be? Why would I feel so raw after listening to it again?
Well, everybody's going to have a unique experience to that, but it's a lot of humans are masters at covering things up and shoving things down. And life is tough, and good grief. Now we have 2020, which is just weird on top of weird, right? So we're just, treading water and trying to make it through this. But your session, your day, you or anybody, from what the high selves tell me, is so divinely timed to the exact moment you need to have this. And so you and I can be thinking, oh, the session's a year out, or maybe I can squeeze somebody in with a cancellation or what, and it just works out. What I know for a fact is it happens when it needs to happen, and you're depositing the information onto that recording that you're going to need. And then it's the unpacking it and the digesting it. And it's so pure to what you need to hear. It can have that raw feeling to it afterwards. But I think the more you listen and the more you kind of work through it, it's like, wow, this is exactly what I needed to know. And again, the empowering part is it's coming out of your mouth, not mine.
Yeah, that is an interesting thing. Okay, so when a long time ago, probably in the 80s, I went and had a past life reading, and essentially I lay there and she just connected in with my history or whatever and answered my questions with her voice and everything. And it's a whole different thing. And it's amazing that that Dolores kind of knew that and figured that out, that the greatest healing comes from when it's self-generated. And that's such a beautiful thing that you do. Because one of the comments somebody made about you and your sessions is that you hardly say anything. Like, it's almost like you're this secret little unnoticeable guide that's taking you from here to there and asking more questions and getting you deeper without being almost detected. That's a beautiful thing.
The art of Dolores was that, we're the investigators. And so we don't want to lead, and we want to explore the experience that you're giving yourself to the deepest. And so, the best that I can do for anybody is to ask open-ended questions about what you're already telling me to get deeper, deeper, deeper into the information. Because the natural thing, you're in a very deep state of relaxation. You're aware of what's going on around you. That's normal. But yet you're able to answer when I'm asking these profound questions. It's a very interesting experience. And so if I'm listening well, which I hope I do, I can just keep taking the information you're giving me and ask more off of that so that we can get more profound information from you. And that it's something that we teach. We don't want to, I might be thinking you're having this really great session, and I'm curious about, so what happened? What if you went down this hallway instead of that hallway? But that's not appropriate. I want to know, what hallway do you pick? And what do you find? Because that's the story.
Oh, right. Oh my gosh. Yes. And in fact, some of the other healing modalities I've been a part of, they always say go down the darkest tunnel, or, if you have like a space of unicorns and rainbows and here's the scary clown, aim toward the scary clown. Would that be a technique, or would you still give somebody the opportunity just to pick whichever one they were drawn to, or how could you get that to happen?
So what we know with this work is that this great part of you that knows everything about you, your high self, subconscious, whatever name you're putting to this part of you, is going to take you exactly where you need to go to find out what you need to know about yourself. So if they start out in a physical body on earth in another time, there's a reason why that's what's coming to your mind, and we need to explore that as deeply as we can. If you are just in black space and you don't even know if you have a body, you need to explore that. Your high self is picked that exact experience for you to find something out about. So that's where somebody like me comes into play, to just keep asking lots of questions to find out why it is you're there. Now, the beautiful part of every session is no matter where they go, it always in some way relates back to this current life again. And we'll find out how that is. And that's, to me, that's beautiful, because the client, I think sometimes can be laying there. I've been a client laying there thinking, what the heck? How does this relate to my life? This, I must be making this up. But in the end, when you listen to it all, it absolutely hones in to what's going on to your life right now, or explains why something in the past was the way it was, or explains how you can go forward in your life in the best way. And sometimes it's all of that. Everybody's unique and different, but you just trust that they're seeing and experiencing exactly what they need to. And we just do the best by asking the open-ended questions so they can grab as much information to get onto the recording.
Oh, that's good. Hey, if those of you who are joining us want to ask a question, type it in the chat box, because I've been watching the chat box. So if you want to ask a question, please do. Okay, so so this idea of just being in space and not being in a body, like how often does that happen? Because how interesting is that a person would get there, and then what do you do with that?
Yeah. Well, and for new practitioners, they're like, they don't have a body, get into a body, no, they don't have a body, it's okay. That darkness is an amazing experience. It's oftentimes a gateway into a different type of experience, but sometimes people are, they're part of space. They're part of the greatness of space, or maybe they're in a dark room, or maybe they're outside and the sun hasn't come up. It can be many, many different things. Sometimes they'll say that they don't have form, they don't have a body. They're just kind of resting. And, I find with that type of client, oftentimes their life has been very, very, very hectic and feeling like they never get a chance to take a breath. And what we find out by the end of the session is that the high self was showing them life is not always like this. Sometimes you are in a place where all you have to do is be. And it's a beautiful experience for them. And it's something that they can, as life goes on after the session, they can recall back in their brain, oh, this is what it's like to just be in that space of being. It can be anything. It's amazing.
Wow. So I feel like I'm so captivated by what you're saying and these things you're saying, that I'm like, oh wait, now I have to ask another question. That's the problem. I'm like, wait, oh my gosh, that's so cool. So I love the idea of the higher self having some consistent messaging. What about, is there any consistency ever among, are there ever any repeat theories or repeat places or past lives? I guess you said something about everybody wants to be Cleopatra, but I've actually met several people that have said they believe they were like Mary Magdalene in another life. Yeah. And so what are some of the other beings that people report having been?
Well, a lot of people report being with Jesus in that time. Oh my gosh, so many. They'll have experiences in different realms that are very similar. Some will have experiences like in the angelic realm. I love this when this happens. Sometimes they'll go back over to the other side. That's what I'm calling, in between lives or in between physical lives. They'll oftentimes go to places that we call temples of healing, halls of knowledge, the Ashkaic records. Sometimes they're meeting with their guides or councils. That's a real, I would say, common experience, but it happens in multiplicity over the years. it's, again, we just never know where you guys are going to go. We have to, it's a big surprise to us too. We just have to go with it and ask the best questions that we can.
Now, does anybody ever say they're actually in heaven?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know if heaven is a concept. And so I would say it's more common for people to say things like they're on the spirit side, or their energy. They're without a body. They're without the wide range of emotions that we have on earth. They're there to learn. They're in school. Classes are a lot of fun on the other side. But yeah, I mean, the heaven meaning that they will say similar things in that it's very bright, but it doesn't hurt their eyes, that it feels so loving to be in this space, that there's other beings, and they'll, sometimes we get the white robes. A lot of times they'll say they're more like energy, balls of light or color. Sometimes it's just all feeling and awareness. It's again, it can be a very unique experience, and there's similarities that tend to bleed through from one session to another.
Okay. Oh my gosh. All right. So Dolores mentioned something, and you said it too, about volunteers. So talk about that. Like, what I've actually used it a lot too, that concept of people volunteering to come and serve a purpose on this planet right now. So talk a little bit about that, and what have you found about that?
Okay, so Dolores talked about 3 waves of volunteers. There's a book that she wrote with that title. And the story behind that is that a call went out through the cosmos that Earth was going to be having this huge shift and change, and it needed souls that were willing to help with this shift. And in Dolores's body of work, she found that there were 3 waves that came in. The first wave were very pure souls, here to spread love, to bring the vibration up. That group, however, hadn't had a lot of human soul experience. And being here on Earth is very hard. It's very dense. And we have duality and everything that goes with that. Those souls had a hard time with their job. The second wave is ones that they kind of tweaked the plan, I think, on the other side. And these souls had more human experience to draw upon. And again, they're here to raise the energy. The third wave are, the newer generation that's here. This could be us and younger, typically, not always. And they're ready to go. They're here. They know that they have a purpose. Sometimes, they're coming, they're like, I know I'm supposed to be doing something, but I don't know what it is. And that's one of their questions. That's a common experience to have with clients coming in these days. And they want clarity of what they're supposed to be doing. So those are kind of what she called the 3 waves of volunteers. Now, one thing that's been very consistent since I started doing this in 2012 is that the high selves have been saying, buckle down. There's going to be a lot going on the planet. And, it's not just my sessions or just Dolores' sessions. I get to see sessions coming in all the time on this global practitioners forum that I'm the director of. Sessions coming in from all over the world over these years that have been talking about this great shift and change. And that has been really interesting, especially in this year of 2020. Because we're like, we're thinking, through the years when they're like, oh, it's going to be, earthquakes and fires and floods. And they're like, oh, no, it's 2020.
This is it. Yeah.
This is it. But everything on the outside is reflecting what is on the inside of us. That's what I believe. And so everything's very chaotic and turbulent outside because we're, for the most part, we're going in and doing the deep work within us to get ready as we're making this shift into higher vibration and frequency.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So now tell me about, like, this all to me seems a little bit, so what do you believe based on your experience about pre-incarnation planning, or that idea of making a plan. And, some people kind of throw it out there like, oh, you chose your mother. You came here to do that. You chose your parents. That's like a flippant statement people make. But what do you know about that based on this work?
That seems to be a pretty common theme, that that there's a plan of some sort, that we're, this lifetime, I need to learn about gratitude, or I need to learn to be humble, or, there's usually some big lessons that we're coming in to learn. And so, either we individually or with our guides are constructing the lifetime that gives us the opportunity in order to do that. And that can be on Earth, it can be on planet Z, it can be, in another realm or dimension. That, I think, is one of the most interesting aspects of what we find out in this work. But, I've had clients say that one of the most interesting one was actually this summer, and she had just a really challenging childhood, we'll call it. And we were asking about, in her session, why she picked the family that she did, because she felt like she's never belonged in this family. She's never, measured up, she felt, to her parents' expectations. Her sister was this star of the family, and all those issues. And what we found out is that she slipped in. She wasn't supposed to be in this family, but through a weird happenstance, she slipped in, and she's in this body, and this wasn't the family she was supposed to go to. I've never, in my years of doing this, I've never heard that one before. I can always be surprised, but that's why she didn't feel like she fit in. Oh. And like, how can that even happen? But her eyes felt, well, it just did, so we just went with it. So that's, and, to her heart, it's like, afterwards, I'm like, how do you feel about that? And she's like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. I wouldn't have thought of that.
Yeah, I know. And just the knowing of it makes it somehow we're able to settle with it once we know it or are aware of it. Sometimes it's just awareness that makes us, that is healing.
Right. And we always have free will. So we can say, none of that is real. I was just making it up, which, trust me, in all the years of doing this, I don't think anybody's been able to make up a session. It's too much. But we have that decision. But what I find is that if you stay open-minded and you really allow that information to come in as you're listening to your recording, you set it for a reason. There must be some value to it. And if you can think that way, then these floodgates open up that help you go even deeper with that initial knowledge that you gave yourself. But it's our choice what we do with that. We hope that people will take it and explore more about themselves, but it's your free will.
Yeah. There's probably a predisposition for those people that are coming to see you to we're actively seeking some kind of healing. So it seems like there's a person, unless mom gifts it to her daughter and she has like no idea what's really going to happen. I suppose some of that happens too.
Oh, some of the funniest and best sessions I've had are, for some reason I get a lot of couples. And it's usually one of the couple is like totally into Dolores and, I've read her books and, I'm a big fan. And the other one's like, I could care the least, I'm only doing this because this one's dragging me here, and I'm like, okay, are you open to this? Are you ready to go with this? And, and they'll be like, whatever. One of my funniest stories about that, if you want me to tell.
Yeah, please. I'd love it.
I had a husband and a wife, and he was totally into it. She was totally not. And I did him the first day, and he was a really super great guy and very good session. She came in the next day, and she's sitting in her chair, a little, like, what the heck, I don't know why I'm here. And she, at the end of it, I'm trying to shift how I explain things, because she's not open to any of the normal things, people that would seek this work out, which is fine, no worries. But I was just trying to dole out the information in the way that I thought would be more available for her to accept. Yeah. And at the end of that, oh my gosh, at the end of that, she looks at me and she says, well, I just want you to know that I think all of this is just BS. I'm like, okay, thank you for your honesty.
Oh, no.
Do you want to proceed, or, are you done? Or, she's like, no, let's just do this. Nothing's going to happen. I'm like, okay. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, get ready. This one's going to rock it. And so I get her over and we start the session, and it's a little bit challenging at first. She's, I'm not seeing anything. It's just dark, and she, that left brain is really firing up with lots of doubt and impatience. And, and I'm like, almost, it takes a lot for me to like think like, what's the next question, because I'm running out of my list. And I ask one more question, and I'm like, so what do you see now? What's the first thing that comes to mind? And she goes, oh, I'm seeing planets. And I'm like sitting beside her going, yes, and like, tell me about the planets. And she goes, well, I'm looking out, I'm on this craft or this ship. And I'm like, yes. And she's telling me that they're going to this planet to monitor something. And we get down to the planet, and she's telling me how she's doing her work. And I mean, it's so detailed. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so good. And she's telling me something about how she monitors. And I said, so how do you do that? And it's so funny, Becky, because she, as you know, she's laying beside me with her eyes closed, but her face just like gets all scrunched up. Like I'm like the dumbest person for asking. And she's like, with my T-track device. And I'm like,
oh my God.
I don't know about a T-track device. Can you explain it to me? And she's like, yes. She goes into all these great details, and this is just the beginning. This is like the first 10 minutes of that life. And then the rest of the session, she just hit it out of the park. And bless her heart, I counted her up at the end, and she opened her eyes up and she looked at me and she goes, I'm God-smacked. And I'm like, right?
That is so cool. It's, it's those kind of circumstances that make you know that this is such an effective tool for helping people, because you can't make it up.
You can't make this stuff up. No, you can't. And, and here's the honest truth. For whatever reasons, we have not been taught that we carry all knowledge and answers within. We'd be way too powerful. We wouldn't be able to be corralled and little sheeple if we knew this. And so, QHHT is just a way. Meditation is another way. There's many other ways of tapping into all this knowledge. And once you know that you have it and you have the experience, and which is a gift in itself, because for a couple of hours you're tapping into that part of you. So afterwards, you're more aware of what it's like when I go in and ask a question that I can trust that answer. Before this experience, you might have called that an epiphany or an aha or this weird moment where all this information came to me. So this is, it's such a life tool to be able to tap into this part of you and trust the knowing that you're giving yourself.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think that's true, because what we do as like seekers is try to we go to classes and we're trying to get all this information. And eventually we start realizing, oh, all of this stuff is leading us back to ourselves. And, then eventually you're like, oh, I can just sit in my living room and meditate and get to the same place. But it took all those other steps to help you kind of turn back into yourself to get that information, and then rely on it, or trust it, not rely, but trust the information that's coming.
Yeah, because we all have it. We all can tap into it. And that part of us wants to help guide us, but it's respectful, because on earth we have this rule of free will. And so it typically won't override free will unless it's a dire circumstance. But we're always wanting a sign. We're wanting, an answer to a problem. And, dreams are a very effective way that they get through to us. And, this part of us that knows everything is always available. It's just understanding how we access it. And that's what we need to be taught and know that we have that power within us.
I love that. Wow. Well, so my session, we haven't really mentioned anything much about that, was so interesting. So um, there was one of the comments, like Suzanne posted a segment of this about Trump because it was so interesting. And it was my higher self is kind of swears and gets really feisty and snarky. And so, but what I could tell is that I was like then my smaller self would come in and say, wait, does that mean I'm supposed to vote for him? Like it would, like I was having a conversation. That must have been weird to have like my higher self establishing this idea and then my lower self saying, you've got to be kidding me. So I did
No,
that a couple of times.
that happens, and here's why this happens. We're on this trajectory, ultimately, say the high selves, that we can access all of this knowledge in a awake and aware state at any time. We're not quite there yet, but we're close. So back in the day, when Dolores was doing this 20 years ago, say, it was way more common for people to have this experience where they didn't fall asleep, but they almost felt like they did. They didn't have any memory of the session afterwards, or they had just a little clips here and there. It was almost like an amnesia experience. Now, the good news about that time was that people really trusted the information that was coming through them because they didn't remember it. And it was on, if you're back in the day with Dolores, it was on a cassette tape. And, there you are talking and you don't remember what you said, but it must be true. So what has happened over time is that what the high selves tell me in sessions is that we're on this trajectory to becoming our high self in an awake and aware physical body. We have access to all this knowledge. So they say, therefore, we don't get the free pass anymore of the amnesia. That was to get the ball rolling and the information flowing. People like Dolores would write books, give lectures. You and I would accidentally click on something and be like, oh my gosh, that's kind of cool. I want to experience that. That was for that purpose. But now, because we're so close to having this fully realized version of ourselves, we have to know what it feels like to be in the state. Therefore, for about the last 10 years, it's been more common for people to still feel somewhat aware in the sessions. They're in deeper than their left brain wants to admit they are. That's why we can access all this knowledge. But in the midst of it, it can feel like they're sitting beside themselves, or they know that they're talking, but they don't know where this information is coming from. Again, a very unique experience for each person. So that small self, you say, and the high self, that conversation is common now to be having. That's why we talk about this before in the session of here's how you help yourself through that. Because that left brain, we want to give it some love. It's learning how to let go of fear, and it's doing its own thing. So you were voicing actually both sides. And the beautiful part about you and your session is that there's utter shock about what your high self is saying. And you're like, what the heck? No way. And to me, that's just perfect, because you're showing both aspects of yourself, right? And that left brain normally wouldn't have said what that right brain was saying.
Yes, for sure.
Right. But for most people, they usually don't voice it so much. It's in their head though. And it's like an internal argument between the two. And that's where, we prep them ahead of time to give them the tips to help manage that left side of the brain. But that's becoming, what the high selves call is that we're merging the left and the right sides of the brain. So we're going to have these growing pains of these both sides. So, in all sessions, you can, well, I won't say in all sessions, but in a lot of sessions, you're gonna hear a little bit of the left side and more of the right side, and it's going back and forth.
Yeah, that was good. It did help me know that it really made me know that the information that was coming through was beyond me. And I think that was important. That was like a real validating.
Yeah, it is. Well, and sometimes in a session, the high self will like deliver a bunch of information that the client wasn't expecting, and it'll go, oh, he's not going to like this, I think that's gold, because if you gave yourself something that your left brain couldn't come up with, you have a new way of looking at something or understanding it that you didn't have before the session. And to me, that's a gift. What you choose to do with it is totally up to you. But, it's, again, we have so much going on in our consciousness, and we're just helping you tap into whatever it is that you need to know. And it's always a beautiful experience.
Oh my gosh, that is just, it's true. It's really, it's a beautiful experience, albeit raw. But I think part of why mine felt so raw is the fact that we did post something that was so controversial.
Yeah, that way, and that's, I've talked about this, throughout the session. When I love putting segment clips up, if it's okay with my client. And I do that overall because there's so many people that won't have a session, but they might have similar issues, and it might help them understand themselves a little bit better. Sometimes they're just fantastical sessions, and it's just like a nice break from reality to listen to them. Yours was just, I think I sat beside you going, oh, because
Tell me more about that. Tell me more about that.
I'm very non-political. I'm very interested in watching the process that's going on right now. And everybody's so, vitriol on each end, and it's hard to watch. But your information, I call your session the activator, because, no matter where you are with Donald Trump, there's probably some things that you heard that you liked and some things that you heard that you didn't like. And as hard as that is, I think it's an opportunity to have a shift in perspective one way, or understand the other side a little bit more, because we've got to come together. And we're experiencing great duality right now with all of this. And it must be what we need as a collective, but holy heck, it is hard. And, your session, it was going to have quite the range of comments. I knew that going out. And, I'm, more, light and floaty with my sessions that I put out, typically not as controversial as this one. But, in the end, you and I really discussed it. And, I think we both felt in our hearts that it was interesting information to put out, and people can take it in and they can click off of it. That's their choice. But I do think in the end it was beneficial information.
Yeah, I think so. So if anybody is out there wanting to know more about it or experience the session, go to Suzanne Spooner. Is it Suzanne Spooner QHHT, or just Suzanne Spooner website?
Suzanne Spooner QHHT.com.
Okay. And that will lead them to the YouTube channel also?
I've got some of the YouTube clips on there. If you go into YouTube and just type in Suzanne Spooner QHHT, a whole bunch will come down there, and you'll find my page.
Yeah, and ours is called Terrific Terrible Trump. And it really, it's such an interesting thing, because it talks about, there's other people that have had the same sort of information come about him being, sent here for this very specific purpose. And the weird thing is, even after I heard that and what you said, it's divisive, and it's like, it still hasn't given me a clear idea of who I'm going to vote for, because it gave me a perspective different from what I thought. But I don't know if that's enough to get me to vote for him or against him, because it's weird. I'm still in a space of, I need to meditate on that a little bit more so I can make a decision based on my heart. Here's another thing that I thought was interesting. In my session, this is one of the things that bothered me, or keeps playing in my head. Said something like, my higher self said, I wish I could just squish that little self away so that she would stop getting in the way of our progress. And I thought, oh my gosh, but here's little old small self who's presenting information in a less snarky way, without swearing, maybe a little bit more appropriate for the time. And yet my higher self's like, that's getting in the way. Isn't that? So I'm like, am I negotiating with my higher self, saying, hey, there's a reason that I'm trying to be socially, politically correct. I'm supposed to be kind. I think I'll get further if I'm nice. versus my snarky self going, this is how it is. So that's the weirdest thing. That's kind of what it's left me with, this idea of, do I really want to squish the small self who's kinder and gentler?
Well, that high self is very kind and gentle as well. I think, from my experience, it's just that they want to help us and they want to guide us, and they have such a broader perspective on our life than we do typically in our kind of tunnel vision view of it. And sometimes they'll, in a session, I'll ask, so how has it been speaking through, this one? And sometimes I'll go, oh my God, it's so nice. I've been trying to let her know, all about this, but she's not a good listener. They're, they have their own personalities. And so, but you're also here to experience, all aspects of this duality life, right? I just, in my understanding, I think we're just getting kind of towards the end of this love-hate, peace war. I think we're wrapping that up, and that's why things are so escalated right now. We're just, getting in the last bits of all of that into a higher plane of dimension. So there's no wrong and there's no bad, really. I don't think. They're all experiences, and that's the gift that we have of free will, is we get to choose. But I think the high selves really, really, truly want the best for us, and it's a breath of fresh air for them to be able to deliver all this information in this short period of time, in this way that we do QHHT.
Yeah. Oh, it's so wonderful. Well, I just appreciate you coming on tonight and, first taking me through a session, which was amazing, and then being able to come and, be a part of this conversation. So I'm thrilled that you came, and just so happy to know you.
Oh, well, likewise, for sure. Yeah, your session was a blast, and it's been fun to stay connected with you. And, I think, it's just doing the work, and finding out more about ourselves and connection, and trusting that we hold all the knowledge and answers and healing within ourselves, and starting to trust our truth a little bit more than we have in the past.
Hey, no, are you going to be teaching anytime anytime soon, or is that just so up in the air you can't even narrow it down?
So that's a great question. Everything's a little up in the air, of course, with travel right now. So for the folks that want to learn QHHT, Julia and another gentleman named Kaya are doing level 1 and level 2 classes online right now. So that's a fabulous way to learn. And we will start doing live classes again. We just have to wait for the normal stuff to settle down. I'm going to be doing a level 3 class. These are the people that have been doing this for a while that really want to take their skill level up. In October, I'll be doing one, and I'm going to be doing that online. But I've got one. We only do 3 students to a class in level 3. It's very intense, and I've got one student from Australia, one from Japan, and one from Canada. So we're going to bless the hearts of the Japan and Australia gals. They're going to be literally up in the middle of the night taking this class. So that's the perseverance. So we are continuing classes. They're just not in the real live format right now.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. So then they'd have to just do like practice sessions. I would imagine if you were teaching it in where you're all together, you would practice on each other. Is that how it works?
The level 1 class, the live level 1 class is set up so that we build in 2 days of practice sessions, and the students will group up into groups of 3, and they'll take those 2 days and they'll practice being the practitioner, being a client, and being an observer. And then the last day of that level 1 class, we come back together and discuss what happened in those sessions, which are always, there's the whole realm of experiences. So it's a great teaching tool for everybody. Level 2, I do believe now Julia's putting in at least 1 practice day there. So there's opportunity for people to get more practice. Some people that have taken the online class, level 1, haven't had their own session yet. So this gives them that opportunity. So, and we really encourage the community to find the practitioners that are close to them to practice with and exchange sessions.
Oh yeah, because I was wondering if it's possible for you to do a session. I mean, like if I was laying down and you were doing a session, if the computer was right next to me, you could do it online.
Well, that's a great question. It's been a big debate, especially through this time of COVID. Dolores was very against doing sessions online for a lot of different reasons. So one thing, I go back and forth on this opinion, truly. But the one thing I can say that I 100% agree with Dolores is in person. There's an energy exchange that is missing when you're online, and that you need to have trust between the two in order for this session to be really good. And honestly, we're looking for very subtle clues as you're going into that deep state of hypnosis that can be missed on a screen. So, it could it be a beneficial session? Yeah, it could be. My heart, I guess I just feel one-on-one is best for all those reasons and more. And I stay very pure to how Dolores taught her sessions or conducted her sessions. And because I follow what she taught, I have really good sessions and I'm consistent. And it's tough, not everybody can travel right now, and that's a big deal. But I think it's always better to do it one-on-one.
Yeah. You remember you said something about you're watching for eye movement and like that subtle things that happen in your face help you understand that, oh yeah, they've gotten to the place that now I can ask questions or whatever. Yeah. So those are the subtle things.
Yeah, there's lots of things going on. And it's really nice to be able to look at the whole body at the time because, you're looking for a lot of different things to help understand where they're at in these levels of consciousness up and down, and if they need some assistance to get back over to that right side or not. So you could see some of that on a screen. I don't think it would ever be as good as one-on-one, and I would just rather give my clients the best experience possible.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Well, I had the best experience possible. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. Suzanne Spooner, thank you so much for doing this tonight and being here and sharing yourself with the world and doing what you do.
Well, thank you very much. I love talking about this. I love being with you again. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will see you maybe in France on our journey as like a feminine roundtable in France.
Let's do it.
All right. Thank you so much. Okay.